Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic is an interesting one. This is an update to an old build guide I did right before the Legendary 8.4 patch, meaning it was right before one of the largest power creep moments in the entire game, and it was also made right before one of its biggest buffs ever. I was planning on updating this build for a while now. Now you must be wondering, why did I choose right now to update the build? I could have waited a little bit longer, right? Well, if you've been keeping up with the Last Epoch Twitch stream, recently a big streamer with over 200 plus viewers recently commented on my build guides about the first version of Forged Weapons ForgeGuard. He had a few criticisms, mainly the one that made me confused was how I was not utilizing the Sunforged set. Now, instead of being salty and talking about that, I'm going to use this as a great opportunity to educate. Now, this is obviously crazy, as the Sunforged helm was buffed after I made my video on Forged Minions, the second one, right? And the Sunforged Greyhammer just is incompatible with the Void Cleave because Void Cleave requires a two-handed sword or axe, while the Sunforged Greathammer is a hammer. Now, I don't know why EHG did this. It's very confusing, but beats me. Now, Void Cleave is literally the main reason we do any damage because the 150 flat you get. Now, the Scent Helm is absolutely insane for forged weapons right now, and if it existed before I made the guide, I would have loved to include it. To be honest, I am very happy this happened because it gave me a great excuse to revisit one of my favorite archetypes in the game, and we have achieved what I had thought the impossible, making Forged Minions T4 viable. So for those who are unfamiliar with forged weapons, how does this archetype work? We simply warpath to summon forged weapons. They are minions that use our weapons for some of their base stats, much like Manifest Armor, but only for our weapons. These are the same forged weapons that are summoned from Forge Strike, which also scales with that tree as well. Now normally, the minions by themselves are not enough to make anyone write home, especially thanks to when they were capped to about 12 to 15 stacks of them. Now, thanks to the insane inclusion of Void Cleave, that is where it starts to shine. Void Cleave is a skill that was added during the Sentinel rework of patch 8.3, and it has slowly crept into a lot of my Sentinel builds. Its amount of utility is unmatched, and for this build, it is entirely essential. It gives our minions a buff when it hits an enemy, all the way up to about 150 melee flat fire at most. This is an absolute gigantic buff of flat damage, close to doubling our flat damage value. But Void Cleave does not stop there. Forged minions usually have one big problem: reaching critical strike cap. Even if you grab base crit on your weapon, which normally amounts to 9% on a two-handed weapon, we get to like 14% chance to crit at base. But Sentinel has no minion critical strike chance affixes, meaning we need to use different tactics to reach 100% crit chance with our minions. That's where Void Cleave comes in. Again, Void Cleave applies 3 stacks of critical strike vulnerability on hit. These are essentially 5% base crit per stack, which is an ailment applied to an enemy on hit with Void Cleave. We have 2 charges of Void Cleave, so we attack on an enemy twice for a free 30% flat crit chance. This on top of the critical strike chance roll on our Odachi and the crit on my gloves, which if I had a better Odachi, it wouldn't be necessary, means we reach to 100% crit chance with our best setup. This allows us to not only run melee attack speed percentage, which is insanely strong with forged weapons, by the way, since they inherit it, it also gives us a large amount of burst damage. Another complaint that was lodged with this build was the fact it looked like it dealt no damage. Sadly, this build is not flashy. It does not cause entire screens to die instantly, but when you Void Cleave something, they just get deleted. As you can tell, when I get to full combo on T4 the damage just skyrockets. It's simply just a bursty build. But Dread, isn't the title of the video one of the tankiest minion builds? Yes, it still is. Thanks to the insane power of the Sunforged Greathelm, with some great rolls, we end up with 80% armor on bosses, and we get 60 flat health regen from it, which opens up slots on our gearing to run other important things like a Twisted Heart for a lot of increased health, which is 100% worth it, by the way, even without LP, and Jirla's Obsession so we can get Void Res for our forged minions, making them ever so tankier versus Jirla, making this finally able to tackle T4 Jirla. If you ended up enjoying the content, I'd suggest liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way to support my efforts here at Epic Builds, and also the best way to tell YouTube that I'm doing a good job. With all that being said, let's get in game, shall we? Alright, here we are in game with the build. So the skill rotation of the build, well, of course, we make sure our Manifest Armor is summoned. Our Manifest Armor isn't as tanky as some other builds, but it's mainly just an extra minion, and it's better than trying to fit the mana for Sigils of Hope. So that's why we're using Manifest Armor. Now, for the rotation, what you want to do is you want to Forge Strike, Cleave, Cleave, Reversal, then Warpath. Now, why do we do this? Well, one of the biggest problems with reversaling and void cleaving and stuff in combat is the fact that this node, Forge Master Stance, it has a delay to it per se. So if I start spinning and poop out a minion, it takes a while. So if I start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, like you're doing with void cleave and stuff, it means that you're not summoning as many minions as you could be. Now what you do is when you're holding it, they spawn at a much faster rate, as you can tell. So what happens is, since we're constantly stopping to cast Void Cleave, because, you know, of course, we want to deal damage, we need to make up that deficit. And to make up that deficit, thankfully, Forge Strike is useful. Since we're building it to so much attack speed, Forge Strike is very fast to cast. And what that means is when we go up to a pack, Void Cleave, well, actually, we Forge Strike first because we want to Forge Strike, create the minion, Void Cleave, give them the buff, and then Reversal for the mana back. And as long as we do that perfectly, we will keep our mana up all the time with our thing. So Forge Strike, Void Cleave, Reversal. And then we get our minions, right? That's pretty much the concept of that. That's the skill rotation. And I hope that makes sense. Now, for the skills here for Warpath, it is pretty much exactly how it was before, except we did a few different changes. Now, we do not grab Dark Nexus anymore. This is completely not worth it anymore, as what we're doing is we're utilizing Forge Strike into Void Cleave, instead of utilizing Sigils, which means we don't need the mana, and we also don't need the Ring of Shields either, which means that we can completely dump Dark Nexus and go into 5 points of Unchained, which makes it so that we don't have negative Res while channeling, which opens up some gearing possibilities on our gear. And of course, we grab 3 points in Quicksilver Wind, because having movement speed is great. 4 points in Molten Path. This is like 2 extra points, but you have nowhere else to spend them, so might as well spend them here. Then 2 points travel to Wave the Executioner, 1 point to Forge Master Stance so you can summon forged weapons, then 5 points into Moving Forge. This is mandatory as you want to be summoning your forged weapons as fast as humanly possible. And that's pretty much it for Warpath. Now for Void Cleave here, we take 3 points into Dark Pathway. This cooldown recovery speed makes it so then by the time our Reversal is back up, our Void Cleaves have both given back our charge. Now, as you can tell, it's a little bit quicker than that, but it's good enough. That's all we need, right? So we take 3 points travel to Armor Sunder. It does give us a bunch of armor shred for free, which is nice and makes it so the minions do their damage instantly. Then 1 point into Nether Charge for the extra charge, very mandatory for the build. And we take 1 point travel to Rift Flame, 1 point into Hellish Chasm travel, then 5 points into Molten Blades. This makes it so we get Molten Infusion stacks on hit, and it stacks all the way up to 150 flat if you do the math. That is insane, and it's global too. So for instance, if our minions are like around, like halfway across the map, they'll still get the buff. That is why we're not running Scorching Path, because your minions, they can be like everywhere, right? They're not always necessarily in the right spot. So Scorching Path is a lot better for when you're just doing like Manifest Armor shenanigans, as you can't really catch the minions in the Void Cleave much. Then, of course, we take 2 points into the depths for the area, and mainly the area, because we want our area to be as big as possible, so we catch as many enemies in it, because 1 point into Precognition, then 3 points into Rift Maker, which apply those crit vulnerability stacks, which are very important for the build. Now, one thing that I would like to do eventually is maybe get a Twisted Heart with +2 to Void Cleave, or some other way of getting plus levels to Void Cleave, maybe taking 2 points out of Dark Pathway and putting it into the depths, so that we have a bigger AoE, so we catch more enemies for the crit vulnerability. I'm thinking about doing that, which I think I might just do right now. Actually, now we're talking about it, making changes on the fly here. There you go, and put it 2 extra points into the depths for that big Void Cleave AoE. Then for Manifest Armor, stereotypical Manifest Armor, just copy this. TLDR, just you want as much health regen as possible. This is like the most flexible slot. If you really want to, you'll have to find a way to get back up to Dark Nexus, and if you do that, you can actually go back to utilizing Ring of Shields. You could use sigils. You could do literally whatever you want. You could even use for Rebuke for all I really care. I'm just using Manifest Armor because it is the least intensive option in terms of like investment, right? I can just summon him. He's there. He's just an extra minion. So I go from 12 to 13. Just think of him as an extra minion. Then reversal, stereotypical reversal setup, 60% increased damage taken, movement speed, reduced cooldown. That's all you really need to care about. There's not really much else. It's mainly just to give you back your mana when you do your combo, so that you don't like run out of mana while you're warpathing, which is very important. Then Forge Strike here is a little different than last time. We take 4 points into Light Forge, get the increased attack speed, Forge weapon attack speed as well, which is nice, and the cooldown recovery speed, raising it down to 2 seconds. That doesn't really matter though. 4 points into Forge by Fire. The additional melee fire is great because that gets even crazier with this melee fire as well. So all of that combined is great. Then 4 points into Well-Forged weapons, so we get a lot more duration on our weapons, which allow you to get up to the max more often, and then brings you from a base of 6 to 10, and then we get 2 from the tree. Then we take 3 points in mass production. This makes it so that when Forge Strike hits a rare or a boss, they instantly pops up one. Pops an extra minion, which makes up for the deficit that we get from moving around with Warpath and like restarting up the channel with Warpath, like I talked about earlier. Now, we are not grabbing Forge Master. Why is that? I'll be completely honest with you. I have not seen any difference between this and like regular Forge minions. I haven't seen a single difference. Like, I think it has a bigger AoE, but like, I'll be honest, it feels no different than having it or not having it. It just changes the look of your Forged minions, which I'm kind of sad with. I wish it would give it kind of like a cleave ability, kind of like a Void Cleave ability for those, and that would be really nice for the build. Maybe make it so they cost mana when they summon, something like that. I don't really care what they do. It just make it a little bit better than just this. I think you could delve deeper into this and make it more useful. Then 5 points into Heavy Strike for the more damage, hit damage for our Forged weapons, which of course is important. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the passives here, take 8 points to Fearless. We want as much HP as possible, and the increased health regen is insane since we're scaling health regen. It looks like 300 here, but let me, so when we get up to 12 minions, it actually goes all the way up to 700, which is great for how little investment we actually have in our health regen, which we'll see soon. 5 points to Armor Clad makes it so you want to be near enemies when you're killing them. 2 points travel to Relentless. You could probably put it back in Juggernaut. I'm kind of dumb, actually. You should probably put it in Juggernaut, actually. Then 5 points into Valiant Charge. This is extra cooldown recovery speed for our Void Cleave, which is nice. Then we go to Void Knight. I'm only taking 5 points to grab Volatile Reversal. My resistances are good enough for me to do that. If your resistances are not, you can grab all 10 points in this. Paladin, we take 5 points travel into Defiance. I didn't need all this res, so I didn't need all that. I wanted as much HP as possible, so that's why I grabbed Valor. I took 5 points on Holy Symbol, then I took some points into Dedication, making it so that I have a little bit more mana regen, so that when I bork, it's fine. But mainly that just feels great. Although you could probably move some points around. You just want as much attunement as possible, which I'll explain later why. Because forged weapons scale off of attunement, their HP, so the more attunement you have, the tankier they'll be. So you want to grab as much attunement as humanly possible. 8 points into Battle Hardened. This is better than Weapons Master because Battle Hardened gives you more armor when hit, and Weapons Master gives you strength, which does not scale your minions. It just scales your armor by 4%, and that's pretty much useless. So we will go for the increased armor when hit, and that's why my armor, my physical res, is not capped, because I just get it capped when I get hit once anyways. 1 point travel into Peltist, 6 points into Guardian. Eventually, I would like to find a way to get 10 points into this. 4 points into Shield Breaker travel. We don't really need this. Although, in theory, what you could do is you could sacrifice 5 points, grab an Axe Thrower, and get a bunch of fire and Fizz Shred. That would probably be worth your time. Now you're thinking about it. But the problem is points. You're very point starved with this build. Then 5 points into Hammer and Anvil. You want the less damage taken. This is one of the main reasons why this build even functions, because we just have a 25% less damage taken modifier. Since we're not casting any throwing attacks, that's why we don't use something like Javelin, because it counts as a throwing attack, and it turns off our 25% less damage taken. It actually makes us take 25% more damage, which is not beneficial at all. 10 points in a Folded Steel, a bunch of flat damage. You want as much flat damage as humanly possible, and it gives us +2 to max forged weapons. 6 points into Might for the increased health, which is great because we want as much increased health as humanly possible, as you'll see why soon. 3 points travel into Infinite Bulwark, 1 point travel into Flawless Defender, 1 point travel into Osprey Spring, 3 points into Shield Crafter. This is one of the most overpowered nodes in the entire game, mainly because it gives you 150% increased minion health for literally 3 points. Necromancer dreams of this node. Then 5 points in Liquid Iron, less damage taken. This is great because it allows us to take 30% less damage over time, which is on top of the 25% from here, and it makes and then that's on top of the 17% I have on my amulet, which is like a lot of DR against damage over time, which allows me to tank things like poisons, bleeds, Jurla beams, Soulfire Bastion stuff, but sadly the Soulfire Bastion kills my minions, so it doesn't matter, but still. And that's pretty much it for the passives. Now, for the gearing, we take a Sunforged Great Helm. We like the 4 health regen, or 5 eventually health regen per forged weapon. I haven't been lucky enough to find it. The increased armor per forged weapon is great too. We get to like 80% armor without sigils on a boss because a throne. That's absolutely nuts. The flat armor on it, the increased armor on it, it's the fact it's on a Sunforged Great Helm, which is like an insane base for this. All of this makes it into one of the best set items in the game, and you just don't use its set bonus because it's that awful. Then Oracle Amulet, I have been making use of Oracle Amulets a lot more because I like the less damage over time taken, because a lot of Jurla stuff is damage over time. Then the minion health is great, minion damage is also great. Yeah, I think you don't want anything else other than minion damage. Dodge is bad, you could get HP there, you could get frailty there, and then health regen as well. Odachi, this is the same Odachi that I was using last time. You know why? Because I haven't dropped a single Odachi with what I want. These things are fucking rare. Exactly everything that's on this is what you'd want, and you could probably seal a T4 crit chance or something and go for like maybe crit multi, melee fire. It's just, you know, I'm not lucky and I don't get good items, I guess, Kappa. And then Solarum Plate, Vitality is great. Minion health would also be great here. That would actually be really good. Then Attunement is great because we want as much minion health as possible, and that gives us minion flat life. HP instead of that Void Res, we could cap Void Res elsewhere, i.e. here. I just didn't get a chest that was better than this. Then, of course, Health Regen is great on the chest. You could use an Argentus. I didn't want to use an Argentus because I wanted the attunement, because you want as much attunement as possible to make your minions tankier. But if you have better attunement elsewhere, you could probably dump this and go for Argentus. Ring, Ribbons of Blood. I did not get the opportunity of going for an LP one. Very important for the build. Makes it so your minions can't be crit. And it also gives your minions leech, which of course is insane. And it gives you leech rate as well. Everything about this ring is amazing. Get an LP one, absolutely insane. Put attunement on it, put minion health on it, you'll be happy. Or crit avoid, I guess. Belt, minion health, very important. Cleanse, very important. Increased health, of course, very strong. And then, of course, the increased health regen is great as well. Like I said, you can't see right now, but we're like 700 because we get a bunch of flat per forged weapon, which makes up for the fact that we're not running flat health regen here or on rings. Then for the other ring, I'm running just health regen, crit avoid. The prefixes, I would rather have attunement, minion health, but I didn't have access to that because, you know, I don't have all the good gear in the world. Drill's Obsession. Right now I'm using a crit chance Drill's Obsession. If you had better crit chance in your Adachi, you wouldn't need this. Now, the thing is, you could go for melee attack speed, T6 melee attack speed. That would be great. You could go for fire res and maybe try to do T4 soul fire. If you had fire res, you might be able to go toe to toe with that. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't been able to find a Drill's Obsession that I like, that I want to waste for that. Then boots, attunement, movement speed, health regen, of course, you know, beautiful. Now I'm using a Twisted Heart. Why am I using a Twisted Heart? Gives you a lot of HP. And one of the biggest problems is since we're running all these suffixes for health regen, as you can tell, we are not running HP suffixes, which means that we lack flat HP, which Twisted Heart has a lot of. And we completely ignore everything except for the health and the strength, which of course is fine because it just has that much. Probably going to be nerfed eventually. Although, to be honest, this is like one of the only builds I've found that can actually utilize this without getting the downside of the ward. So that's really cool. And then for idols, Throne of Ambition, as much HP as humanly possible while also capping your resistances. Because there are no good minion idols for Sentinel. With all that being said, that's pretty much it for the build. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest day wherever you're at. And bye!